Wow. Hi, everyone. My name's Kate Constantine. I'm a concrete quarry from the big bustling urban metropolis known as the City of Sydney. I'm a very proud Gadigal woman, mother and artist of the Eora Nation. The Eora Nation is made up of 29 diverse clans and is bound by 3 amazingly mighty rivers, the Hawkesbury to the north, the Georges to the south, and the Nepean to the west. At this point, I would like to acknowledge all elders, past, present, and emerging, for their contribution to our rich tapestry. Our culture would be nothing without those that have come before us, that are coming now, and that will come through behind us. To Arnie Delta and her amazing Arakwal mob, you have probably the best dreamland, the best dream country, or Nangami Nura in my language, that we could ever hope to live on. So today I pay my respects to them and thank them very dearly for this opportunity. Today, let me share with you my truth. This is my story and my story alone. I am of Aboriginal descent on my father's side, but I have mixed ancestry, as most of us do. The significant difference for me is simple. I was brought up in a vacuum of denial. You see, my father doesn't identify as Aboriginal. Neither does my brother. It's just that it was never really spoken about at home. The absence of this voice, creating a deathly vacuum between my father and his parents, between him and his brothers and sisters, my aunts and uncles, and also between him and me. Regardless, he still doesn't identify. He doesn't, hasn't, and won't participate in any Aboriginal culture because it was denied to him. It was an absence in his life, a complete erasing of a truth. But it is his denial that fuels my power for positivity, fuels my desire to allow my children to connect, learn and share with their Aboriginal heritage. You see, my dad was born into abject poverty in the 1950s in the inner city suburb of Newtown in Sydney. The welfare was a very real threat to poor families, let alone those with some black fella in them. In this time, my grandfather had a very unhealthy relationship with both alcohol and gambling. He would often drink or lose his weekly truck driver's wage the day he was paid. It was a time in my life where my dad and his older brother would pickpocket my pop in an illegal gambling den under my nan's instruction at the age of 5 and 6, way later in the night than 2 little boys should have been out in a cemetery in the city. See, that's where the illegal gambling den was, in a church. Pause for effect. In the 1950s in Sydney, in that part of town, the white cars and the welfare were such a threat. One can only assume that neither Nan nor Pop wanted their 5 kids collected and interned as wards of the state. God knows, with Pop's track record, they'd never likely get them back. And so it was that being Aboriginal or Black was never mentioned. But that's not really the whole truth. While forms of traditional culture were never practiced for us or by us, it wasn't as if we didn't know. Our Christmas faces were both black and white, and we'd all pile into a laneway which held my grandparents' housing commission house. See, a lot of our family have Aboriginal partners. They have Aboriginal wives and husbands, and of course they have black children. I thought nothing of it growing up. Perhaps I didn't even notice. But 2, nothing was ever said. Until one day it was Boxing Day, and my Aunt Marge, an Aboriginal Gamilaroi woman, married to one of my dad's younger brothers, with half an amount of joking and a whole lot of amount of earnest, said something like, "You got a whole bunch of blackfella in you too, girl. Look at Peanuts." See, Peanuts was my pop. And this was the first time that anybody had given my Aboriginality recognition, a voice, an inherent responsibility. I have many regrets from this moment, For it was many years before the passing of Peanuts and my nan, and at this point in my life, I would have still had time to understand more about where I came from. Instead, I was terrified. I was totally confused and unaccepting of what this might mean to me, my then husband and our relationship, as I knew his views on race. I also worked at an ultra-conservative talkback radio station at the time and feared for more than just my job. So instead, I dyed my hair a lovely shade of blonde. I stuck my head in the sand outwardly, and internally that day, a fire was lit within me. So why the secrecy? In a single word, stolen. My great-grandmother was part of the stolen generation. In a very dark corner of Australia's DNA, it was first deployed under the guise of protectionist policies, where people, including children as young as 12, were forced to work on properties where they worked under horrific conditions, and most did not receive any pay. Then in 1937, the Australian government agreed to move towards assimilation policies. Sounds good, doesn't it? These policies aimed to integrate Aboriginal persons who were not of full blood into the white community in an effort to eliminate the Aboriginal problem. As part of this, there was an even greater increase in the number of children forcibly removed from their homes and placed with white people, either in institutions or in foster homes. Please understand, this still continues today. In any case, my great-nan, for a woman born in the late 1800s, was a dynamo. She was married to a white fella. She had a brood of children with him, but at least one of her 7 were not her husband's. Percy was the son of an Aboriginal man, the Aboriginal man who lived in her backyard. I hear you, strange, right? So what woman in the 1920s and 1930s in Sydney has an Aboriginal man, and I say a camp, in her backyard in Camperdown? This is why I wish I had more time with Peanuts, to understand who they were. Were they my family? Were they people from the local mission who'd bunked off and didn't want to get in trouble with the police and had a safe haven to stay? Were they out-of-towners? And was the camp just merely somewhere to rest your head? Either way, my nan, under the guise of her connection to both culture and country, was helping her mob. She was protecting them. She was protecting them in her place, Sydney. She was giving them a safe place to journey through country. Remember, this deed would have been illegal at the time. In speaking with my dad years ago, he corroborates this story but still remembers the Blak's camp, or Blackfella camp, being in the backyard as late as the 1960s or early 1970s. That's within our living memory. So within our living memory, my great-grandmother, who was stolen, has an illegal Blak's camp in her backyard, has at least one child out of wedlock with her white husband to a black man. So it's likely that her Aboriginality wasn't really a secret, right? But I gather it wasn't really discussed. And so begins the denial of my ancestry and the beginning of our trauma. Also within my living memory is my pop, Peanuts, a drinker and a gambler, terrified to identify in his younger years for fear that it will make his family a target for Australia's government and welfare, and that his children may also be taken, as his mother was. Also within our living memory is my dad, who remembers how hard it was being so poor in the inner city suburbs of Sydney, with a father mostly on the road or drunk. And also, he begins his very unhealthy relationship with being a workaholic and working instead of living, and success at any cost. And then there's my generation, with mixed race Christmases, gifts that fell off the back of a truck, family members in and out of jail, substance abuse issues, teen pregnancies, broken marriages, broken homes. And then there's me, with an insatiable need to be a success, workaholic tendencies, a broken marriage, severe and chronic illness, and finally burnout. This is trauma. This is my truth. I am an Aboriginal contemporary artist. I'm a dot painter. I don't paint under my own name. I paint instead under a moniker called Konstantina, a mashup of my first initial and my new married surname. See how I did that? Why wouldn't I paint under my own name? Surely an artist creates in part to be success and have a little bit of ego. To begin with, I was so terribly confused by what my acknowledgement of my Aboriginal ancestry would mean. Let that sink in for a little bit. Why would it feel so scary for me to claim my ancestry? What's the problem there? I'm an Aboriginal artist with a made-up name, yeah, and I have really light skin, milky, fair skin, like a weak cup of tea, I've been called. Do you even know how many times I have contemplated fake tan? I can't even tell you how stressful it is to be booked for a show and have the organiser look at you when you turn up, when they've expected you to walk in chocolate brown and instead they get me. But herein lies the great governmental success of the Aboriginal assimilation policy. Remember, it's the practice of eliminating the Aboriginal problem by stealing children from their families and placing them with white people in an attempt to make the non-full bloods white. And of course, the government's welfare. I say welfare because no one was ever well under the Protection Act, but a lot of us did come out fair. I look white. I know. Do they win? By stealing children, both long ago and still in contemporary Australia to this day, with a particular penchant for those of mixed ancestry, they, the government, the authorities, the welfare, the whites, the coloniser, are breeding out our black. It's confronting, isn't it? Generations of confused, terrified children growing up too white to be black and too black to be white. As an artist, my connection to culture is powerful. It is from this position I can get loud. It is from this position that I can call out bullshit on what is keeping our people under the government's welfare, under-educated, under-resourced and at high risk. It is from this position that I put on exhibitions that speak to identity. It is from this position that I myself sometimes feel silenced. Exhibitions like Black Enough, where I first considered why I would or should justify my ancestry, and if I was going to, why would I, and to who? The cast collection was inspired by the vitriolic treatment of Aboriginal people of mixed heritage, like the amazing Bruce Pascoe and Dr. Anita Heiss, to diminish their persuasiveness in their debates about racial issues in Australia. See, they're successful. Negative Space, another politically charged exhibition where I portrayed the absence rather than the presence of culture in my work. And Colour Correction, a body of works where I explored coloured as a mistake. It seems that antagonists, those that like to undermine a black fella, any black fella, on the basis of their skin colour, their postcode, that like to call for DNA tests and force us to need a letter of proof of our Aboriginality and tout, he's not really that black, she's not really that black. The conservative media journalists and our even more conservative Prime Minister have unwittingly created an army of young, accomplished First Nations voices. In an era where it took a black man in another country to die, screaming, "I can't breathe," for Australia to finally hear. Black lives do matter, which covers all black lives. Fair fellas like me to my blackest sister in Arnhem Land, and we will not be silenced. This reduction of my cultural value by others is done to lessen and weaken my cultural power and my cultural voice. It is done whether subconsciously or indeed consciously to rob me of my power and to shrink my black confidence, so that I don't stand up and voice my disagreement at all the little things that I think are shit. It's all those little things, it's the 1% things that make all the difference. Without my confidence in my culture, I am nothing. And if I'm nothing, I'm not black or white. And that's just not something I'm willing to accept. So with my eyes, my heart, and my soul wide open, 5 years ago, I threw myself into my culture, into my research, my learning, and my listening. Sure, it might not be the same way it was done 60,000 years ago, but tell me your mob had Ancestry.com 60,000 years ago. I'm learning, I'm listening, I'm speaking, and I'm teaching, and I'm, of course, painting. And I won't be the forgotten generation that slips through the cracks. I will not allow my culture to creep towards extinction. I will always have fair skin, but I will always be black. I was once told that it was not the colour of your skin that makes you a black fella, but rather the colour of your heart. So I, like my children and many others to come, may not look as your definition says we should look on the outside. But please don't underestimate our cultural power and confidence. We have to work so hard to be in the space between the two worlds. Never underestimate us.